Yo, yo, yo. All right, all right. So I just want to, real quick, make sure everything is going how I want it to be. Everything is well set. Looks like it's all up and ready, all up and running. Um, all right. So I want to have a discussion or a talk um, about woke definitions, language, how definitions are changing, what that kind of leads to, how people attach themselves to labels, how people throw labels on other people, um, and how other people accept those labels. Um, if anybody wants to hop in, I've got a link in the description. You know what I'll actually do? I'll just get this on ready. So if anybody else pops in, um, then they can hop in. Um, so I don't know. I've kind of been having discussions and talks with people about woke and what it means, and I've gotten a good amount of um, thoughts and opinions. Um, Not really that, not a good amount, I guess. A few people, and largely kind of from what I get, and it's really weird and it's really confusing because I'll see things where there will be people who effectively deny that wokeism or woke means what it means. Um, they'll just kind of say, "Oh, it just means that you're aware of social and racial issues." That's what a lot of people will um, how a lot of people will kind of set it. They'll just kind of have it be, "Oh, it just means being aware and all that stuff and all this stuff." Um, but I believe that it's kind of like you being woke. Like if you are woke and all it is just being aware of social and racial issues, then most people would probably be woke unless you were just kind of like divorcing yourself from all of that kind of stuff. Um, and so there's, okay, so it's people kind of what was I saying? Sorry, I'm very easily distracted. So I hear footsteps going and I'm like, what's going on? Um, so I'll get stuff where, people are kind of somewhat there's people who are reluctant to take on the label of um, woke, largely because it's been criticized and um, I don't know if demonized is necessarily the right term for it, but it's been criticized harshly. Um, sure, if you want to say demonized or whatever, then that's fine. But demonized usually means like, hey, there's nothing actually to this. It's kind of it's a non-issue, and you're just making it something that it isn't by demonizing it. But I think that the way that it would be being demonized is by the criticisms that people are presenting. Um, and I think that a lot of the criticisms are very fair. Um, and so I've kind of had this discussion. Um, and they said that it was like, oh, there's another one. Um, is, so there's all like wokeism, I think, takes the way I view wokeism is, or wokeness, whatever variation you want to think about. The way I view it is it's um, it is being aware of social and racial issues, which when it comes to social, it that includes like gender ideology and a whole host of other, just I don't know, various kinds of things, and you kind of can see it when it presents itself. Um, so it's that, and then it's what to do about it. And I think that it's like an ideas on what it is that you should be doing about it. So and usually, typically, um, I've had people say that like don't call it woke, call it just progressives. Progressive, I've heard it be call it egalitarianism. Um, and so it's like but I don't think that those ones really necessarily fit to be um, under progressive, because progressive ideas and egalitarianism, like that, those concepts have um, their own individual like ideas and platforms, and it is a system of beliefs. So it's kind of like this follows into this and this follows into that, and it, like everything kind of tracks with itself. But I think that woke is its own version, it's its own thing. And I think that it pulls from, I wouldn't disagree that it would pull from um, progressives and egalitarian and whatever else somebody might want to, something that has to do with equality and equity and fairness and things like that, whatever terms you might want to have for that. um, but I think that there's some pitfalls that happen with the woke ideology. Woke also um, involves, I think woke also necessarily involves intersectionality. um, I think intersectionality plays a huge role in what woke is and how it functions and all this stuff. So, um, yeah, let me see. Um, well, then there's like, let me see if I can do this. Okay, so this is the woke definition. I've put this up on my last one that I did. Um, Especially issues of racial and social justice, social issues or social justice. And so I think that probably most, if not all people who would be social, like a social justice warrior, would be woke, because they would have this string and this set ideology. They would have these set opinions and positions and beliefs on what to do about being aware, aware and actively attentive to important. So I think it's the actively attentive, which means that you're effectively taking action. You're um, it's not that you're necessarily taking action, like you're going out into the world and you're proselytizing all of this stuff or whatever, but it is kind of like when these topics or these issues kind of crop up, maybe they crop up around you, which they're all over the place now. Then what happens is that um, you take a position on those. And oftentimes when you have somebody who is woke, they will take a very, they will all generally take the same position. um, and so I think recently, one of the topics that I kind of had a discussion about regarding it was surrounding racism and the definition of racism and um what is racism. And my general position, which I think is a very reasonable, rational position, is that racism is um, prejudice or discrimination against another individual or group based on the color of their skin. I think that that's what racism. Race is a fundamental detriment of human traits and capacities that racial differences produce an inherent superiority. So you're basically acting using this definition, um, that's that leads to superiority, right? That's effectively what, um, basically, I'm better than you, or you're lesser, or something along those. Um, yeah, racial discrimination or prejudice. And then you can have the systemic oppression of racial group and the social, economic, and political advantage of another. Political or societal system founded on racism designed to execute its principles. Um, and so it came, there wasn't anything prior to this. I think the time that I saw earlier, where is it? It was 1902 is where I thought I saw it here. Um, I don't know where I saw it before. I think it was in the etymology. It was in the etymology. 1902 was the meaning defined at sense one, right? So in 1902, it was defined. And so I've had people say that it was defined in, um, 1970, that's when, like, that's the working modern definition. And I don't think that that's true at all, because the entire time that I grew up, it has always been this it has always been this definition. And so when, um when I first kind of effectively heard about it, it was like the shifting and the changing of it. Gosh, I want to say, I don't know if I can say as early as 2016, but probably in 2017, you could kind of see how you could see the alternative use of it, the woke version of it, which is power plus prejudice, um, equals racism, or racism equals power plus prejudice. Um, and so I probably noticed that being taken into account and used in that way probably in 2017. I think that it probably got very much so popularized by the activist crowd, the woke activist crowd, when the book White Fragility came out. Um, I think that's probably when it really kind of took off, and people started kind of more or less adopting that version. And what I find is interesting is that, is kind of people's refusal to acknowledge, the actual definition of racism, of it just being prejudice or discrimination against an individual or a person. Hey, I see somebody might have just popped in here. If you want to join, I got a link in the description. Be happy to talk. Um, it's kind of partly what this stream is about, is having conversations. So if you're interested, hop on in and we can do something. We can have a little chat. Where was I? There's, yeah, people don't really want to acknowledge the, like, current day people who are woke. They don't want to acknowledge this definition. They want to acknowledge the power plus privilege. Um, and they kind of, in a sense, act like that has kind of always been what it is. Which for me, growing up, it's always like there's a like being a white guy, right? Like I have experienced racism, like racist comments and things like that, but it never really felt harsh. It never really felt um it almost more or less kind of felt like a joke, right? um I would kind of just wave it off as like, whatever, dude, I don't really care. And it never really, even then, it never felt serious. Like it felt like the people who would be making the criticisms of me and my skin, um they it never really felt as if it was, as if their criticisms were real, as if their criticisms were justified. um and they never really, oftentimes it just kind of came off more or less as a joke, because they would be from, oftentimes, kind of people that I knew. um and that was fine. I didn't really have, um I didn't get all bent out of shape about it. So yeah, I think that I gotta stop saying I say way too much. There we go again. So there's I can't stop doing it. I'll try though. So there's a lot of different words and definitions that people are probably kind of working on shifting and changing. Um, a lot of different definitions that people are shifting and changing. So let's see. What else can I? It's too much of a habit. I feel it. I almost feel it coming. Um, and honestly, it just pops out naturally. I gotta stop. I gotta fix that. Fix it. Fix it. Fix it. Fix it. Fix it. Fix it. Let's see. So yeah, people have kind of, the way they will look at it is, in America. It's weird because it's largely kind of like an American version. Like this, that's kind of what a lot of this is an American version of it. An American definition that's kind of shifting around the world. It's getting pushed into other countries, and that's a little bit of a freaky thing. Let me shift back up here. So, what else can I get into? Let's see. Kind of looking up some other topics or conversation pieces. Yeah, people think that. I guess this is a kind of an interesting thing, is that as activism, I guess, and there's almost a conversation in this, is for activists, and how activists in our modern day, in our modern age, with the levels of communication that we have, they are able to shift what it is that what the conversation is kind of about. And people can kind of come and go, and they can, or not necessarily come and go, but they kind of enter into a space, and they can be bombarded with pieces of information, as to, and if you disagree with those things, oftentimes, unfortunately, you kind of end up getting um, attacked, I guess, to some degree, or rejected, or whatever, things along those lines. um, and so I think that there's, it kind of makes having a dialogue and having a discussion and producing something and pushing it out, it makes it a lot more difficult. It makes it a lot more difficult to really get anywhere in an actual conversation, because if I can't identify a belief system and a an ideology, right? And how and system of beliefs that produces positions that is has evolved into an ideology, because effectively an ideology is and it's weird because I guess technically you wouldn't be able to say that it's an ideology because there's no book on it, right? But there's which maybe you can, maybe there are ideologies. Well, I guess there are ideologies that don't have books, but it's an ideology that has a set of beliefs, and then from that set of beliefs, using that ideology and how to think about that set of beliefs produces the suggested actions that should be taken for all of that. So um but if people are unwilling to acknowledge themselves as being woke, then how do I have that conversation? Then at that point, I'm just having to talk about each individual topic, each individual situation. And I think that that can be a little different, a little difficult to really get to the point, especially if you're talking talking, if you have to talk to a whole bunch of people and figure out, like, here's what I find is that people will deny that they're woke. And then when you start talking about a topic, like say here's racism, and then you'll find out, oh, you have you follow the woke definition of racism. Okay, it's like you're woke then, because chances are if you're woke, then you also feel this way about um the like trans issues, right? You probably feel you're in the same boat as like trans women should be able to play in female sports. That's what they should be able to do. And you can probably go down the line of various other topics, and figure and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, so you are following a woke ideology, but now you at this point you've only talked to like one person, and you've just kind of discovered that they're woke, but they don't really want to acknowledge that they're woke. So if people are and then if you move on from that conversation with that person, you start having a conversation with somebody else, and you find out that they have this one individual position, and you're like, oh, well, you're probably woke, and they're like, no, no, no. And then it's like, no, I'm not woke, that's a racist term or whatever, blah blah blah. It's like, well, what's your position on this, what's your position on this, what's your position on this? And it all ends up being what they're all woke positions. So it's like, in a sense, I feel like there's people who they want to have all of those positions, but they don't want to have the individual ideological, like they don't want to have the criticisms that have already been levied against woke, because it's basically like woke equals bad. Like woke is not a positive, it's not a good thing. um, as far as people who are woke and deny it, they don't want to. That's in a sense how they feel about it. Oh, it's woke. They oh, that's woke. No, I'm not woke. I'm not woke, because woke has all of this negative connotation attached to it. Um, and they don't want to enter into a conversation with all of that negative connotation. But then when you start talking about all of those individual things, it's like, well, all of the criticisms that I have are towards woke, and you're pushing, like, these are woke beliefs, these are woke ideologies, so you're still getting the criticism. It's just that it's kind of like spread out, because it's like, and then there's individual arguments around each of those, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think that that's actually probably pretty good to be able to have those, but it makes it difficult to have that conversation at a large scale for people to be able to understand what it is that we're really talking about. And the other kind of the difficult thing is, so here's the other difficult thing is that it's been in a sense demonized, or it's been criticized so much that it's been rejected by the people who are woke. And then the people who are woke that reject that, they look at the people who are using woke, and then they just put them in a camp. They are like, oh yeah, you're like the white supremacist guy, or you're the sexist or the misogynist or whatever. I mean, whatever it is. So it's almost like people are putting each other in a box, but how do you have the conversation? How do you evolve this? It's a difficult thing because you want to be able to talk about the individual issues, but you have to have a grouping label to say, okay, when I'm talking about this, I talk about this issue, and I talk about this issue, and I talk about this issue, and I talk about this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and you just keep on going down the line, and then you can say, okay, all of this stuff, what are we going to call this ideology that has all of this that follows? I'm going to call it woke. So now we can have a conversation about what the ideology is doing on a large scale, right? Oh, it's in, like, if I want to say, oh, wokeness is effectively promoting discrimination towards other people, or it's enabling discrimination, as well as stepping on other people in order to get a leg up, in order to enter into other people's spaces that have been designated for them. So how do you really have, like, you want to have that conversation. You want to be able to talk about all of these things. Hold on a second. One moment. One moment, please. Hold on. Okay, so let's see. What else can I talk about? Along these lines. Intersectionality. Intersectionality, really, I think, what if you almost called it, that doesn't even fit it, because intersectionality is just another part. It's like an ingredient. It's like an ingredient to wokeness. Like, in order to have wokeness, you have to have intersectionality. Because I don't know, well, and it's a certain level. It's a certain level of intersectionality. Because I know that progressives can have intersectionality, and I don't think intersectionality on the face of things is necessarily a bad thing. I think that it is, on the face of it, it is good. It's kind of like putting yourself in other people's shoes and kind of understanding where other people are and how other people think about things. But it's what the woke aspect of it is that it kind of makes it's what follows from it. That's what woke does. It's like it's the follow through on what to do with these concepts, with this information, with the awareness, right? So when you look at situations like trans women. Um, trans, you can kind of put yourself in their shoes. It's like, well, a trans woman or a trans man wants to be that. They want to be the trans. They want to be the opposite gender, and they want to be treated as such, and they want to be treated as such in all ways. And it's like, that's from not an what's the other one for sympathetic, from a sympathetic view, not empathetic. I think empathetic is like you can understand emotionally what they're going through because you have either gone through it or you can put yourself in their shoes so much so that it's like you're empathetic. Empathetic. By empathy, the action of understanding, being aware, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experiences. Okay, so it would be, I guess, because you're vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of others, of another person, um, without having the feelings, thoughts, and experience fully communicated in an objectively explicit manner. So you could say, somebody who has suffered, gosh, the algorithms and what you're able to, the words you're able to use. We'll say the R word. Um, Somebody suffers that. I may not be able to fully understand like what goes on with that and what somebody is feeling, but I can kind of like vicariously put myself in that kind of a situation to understand how awful that kind of an experience would be, right? So so you can have you know we can kind of put ourselves in in trans people's shoes to some degree and kind of understand how difficult it might be to exist in the world without the world necessarily acknowledging and understanding what it is that you're going through. And so the goal of that would be to minimize the levels of, because they would very likely be experiencing large levels of discrimination. They could be experiencing large levels of discrimination, but I think that there's kind of a limit, or there's a limit of how far you can go with what it is that you allow in these kinds of situations. If you're going to a party or something like that and you're a trans woman or even a trans man, you want to be able to go into it and have people use your pronouns. That's understandable. I don't think many people would truly have a huge issue with that. Hey, I think somebody just popped in. If you want, there's a link in the description if you want to have a chat. I'm very interested. I want to keep this thing going. So yeah, where was I? Yeah, you want to enable people to be able to have the best kind of life and the best kind of experience. So if they walk into, like I said, like they walk into a party and they're like, you would hope that people would use your pronouns. Now that's not getting into the non-binary territory or multiple genders that we don't know a whole lot about that kind of stuff. So but I think that there's limits to it for I have an idea. I wonder if I can. I'll do this. do this. Join the discussion. And then I don't really have to say, hey. I don't know, because I end up losing my train of thought for a moment whenever I invite somebody over. It's like, hey, there's somebody popped in. If you want to hop in, feel free. So I think that there's a limit to what it is. And my general rule of thumb is like, as long as you're not stepping on others in order to, if you're not taking over somebody else, like other people's space, if you're not going into that, I think that it's generally fine. Now, there's certain territories that I think are where I don't necessarily know, and I don't think I can. This is something I can empathize. It's difficult because there's two levels of empathy, and there's two places that I sympathize with kind of both sides, which is the bathroom issue. Um, Being a guy, I could really care less if a if a trans man walks into a bathroom, into a male bathroom. I really like. I'm not. There's no real levels of threats that I have to be concerned about, really. Um, even largely like hypothetical or theoretical or whatever. There's not a lot that I would really have concerns about. But I can understand how women or females would be cautious because it's kind of a bit of new territory. We don't know, like there has been situations, but I think that having those kinds of situations happen on very rare occasions. Those kinds of things can happen either way. But I think that there is like a level of comfortability, and I can understand how some females may feel uncomfortable with someone who is. I mean, I in a sense, I almost feel like it's almost like this. Like if you're a trans woman and you go into a female bathroom and you pass plenty well enough, I don't think that it would even be noticed. It probably wouldn't even be noticed. So those are not the people that people really have too many concerns of. People probably more or less have concerns about what if maybe somebody who really does not pass, or it seems as though they're not really putting any effort in, or they are just kind of like, yeah, this is, yeah, hey, you know what, almost like a joke, like, hey, I'm identifying as a woman right now, so I'm going to go in there. And I think that all these kinds of things are really rare. I don't think if they ever even happen at all. I mean, I'm sure it's happened because what is it, Murphy's Law? Like if it can happen, it will happen. I'm sure that it has happened, but it's I don't think that it's hit a point to where it's a problem. But then when you kind of then take it over into like trans sports or female sports or women's sports, then I can see that there's an easy case that can be made to say, hey, wait a second, this you're stepping into somebody else's territory, and there's and everyone is kind of affected by this. I mean, me as a guy, and I mean, I don't really watch sports so much anyways. I mean, I'll watch games here and there. If I'm at a bar or a restaurant and the game's on, like I'll watch it, and I like watching them, but I tend not to just, you know, I tend not to seek it out. Um, and so I think that when you have situations where there are people when you have people who are trans women and they enter into these sports competitions and they end up dominating, and not only do they dominate, but they break records. They break all previous records. I think that there's a very easy case to be made there's that this isn't fair. We're clearly stepping over a line here. But this is not it's not a well, let's see. So it's not a fair, it's not a fair situation, and it's unfortunate because, you know, there's people who will say, oh well, just have a trans league, and it's like, okay, well, I suppose you could do that, um, but you'd have to have enough athletes, and it may just kind of be one of those things where there's just not enough people to make that happen. But I think that, you know, if you're going to be trans and you want to make it a career, it's your career is in sports and you're a trans woman, you probably picked the wrong pathway, is probably what's kind of happened. There's, you know, playing in competitive sports is often not a lifelong, it's not a lifelong career, right? You pretty much are done in your probably mid 30s, and then you're gonna have to figure out something else to do. And maybe it's not the best place to go. And if you like to play sports, if that's what you want to do, and you want to be competitive, well, you can do that, but do it at your local get together. Do it at your, um, you know, go play at your local sport thing that sets up teams, and they're not necessarily they're not necessarily stringent on who wants to play. Like they can have women and men, and everybody can kind of play on however they want. Maybe they can even have, and maybe they can even have, you know, and I'm probably sure that they do, is that they have leagues where men and women and whoever wants to, they can come and compete, they can play. So I think that there's still a pathway where they can have that, the experience that they're seeking. They can have that kind of an that lived experience, but it doesn't have to be in a competitive realm. Most people who attempt to enter into competitive sports, like high level competitive sports, most people don't even make it in. But if you have a trans woman who has a much larger, they have a much larger frame, they you know, they trans, maybe they even transitioned later in life when they were, you know, say they were like 20 in their mid 20s, they're going to have they're going to anytime really, they're going to have larger bone structures, they're going to have um, harder bone density, they're going to have better tendon strength, they're going to have better blood flow with the bigger heart, their muscle mass is going to be larger, they're just going to have a general natural level of strength that kind of gives them a pretty solid edge, I think. And so, um, you know, I think that that's a bit of a territory where I can understand where people might say, hey, you know what? Uh, I don't think that this is fair. I don't think that we should have these. I don't think that we should have these people involved in these arenas. And I think personally, I think that that's fair. Um, a line has to be kind of be drawn. You can't demand that, you know, females get with trans men as though they are men, because, you know, it's kind of difficult and a bit annoying because it's like trans people want to be thought of and express themselves and all of this and be treated as the gender that they identify as, but you can't have that in all areas. If, say, you've got a 20-year-old girl, say you've got a 20-year-old girl, and they want to have children, and they want a partner to have children with, um, and then they get with, they're supposed to be with, and they want to be with a man. Well, that man is a trans man, and that trans man is unable to have children, is unable to give them that. And so to kind of, mm, to treat them the same as a man in that situation, um, like it's not that they're, maybe there are other men who are, um, they're infertile, they can't have, they're unable to have kids, their swimmers don't work. So, um, but at that point it's kind of like, oh well, this is something that I need, this is something that I really want, therefore I'm gonna move on. Nice to be with you, nice to see you. We can remain friends or whatever, but this just isn't going to work. There's, I think that's an acceptable reaction, um, if that's what somebody wants to do, if that's what somebody wants. But to somewhat enforce that you would be in the wrong to oppose that, or maybe someone's attracted to a certain set of genitals, and you know maybe there's guys who, um, they want to have, be with a woman who has a vagina, and they're not attracted to, you know a post-op vagina, like a, um, they're not interested in that, or they haven't gone through, anything, and they still have their penis. So, and to, in some sense, enforce that they should be for that, and they should overlook those things. um I think that kind of crosses the line. And so I think that there's a lot of things where there's lines that are there, and they probably should not be crossed, and they probably should not be pushed onto society, um because I don't think that it really fits so well. I don't think it works out all that great. So, and I think that that's what kind of woke and intersectionality kind of does, is it'll say, I want to take this, like, here's my empathy, here's what I want to put my empathy towards you, and I want to be in agreement with you, and through that agreement we have to take these actions, and because this is your lived experience. And so it's like, okay, you want to play in women's sports, I can understand why you would want to, because you want to seek acceptance, and you want to have, you want to have a man, and hey, you know what? There's plenty of men who are interested in trans people, but to demand that kind of thing is probably not the best way to go. But you have all of these things. So when you go down those routes, um, it kind of overly complicates things, and it ends up causing problems. It ends up causing societal problems, and it spawns discussions. And I think that in this time right now, this is kind of where the discussion is. The discussion is generally around woke types of topics. Um, and so I think that there should be conversations about these things, and they should be able to be we should be able to have a dialogue about these things, openly and honestly, and be on the same page, at least, of the terms and the language that we're using. Because I see so often that, like, okay, when we're talking about, like, how do you have a conversation about racism when white people can't have racism done to them, when you can't, when there is no, you can't be racist towards a white person. Like, how do you have a conversation about racism when that's just not even a possibility? Like, we're not even talking about definite at this point, where that we're taking intersectionality and basically saying, okay, white people are effectively untouchable, and therefore, you know, and it's kind of weird because it's almost like a level of superiority that's being projected onto white people. You know, another term that I've kind of been thinking about lately is people of color, POCs. Um, and it's kind of one that it's strange to me because it's almost like it's inherently pushing that it's inherently pushing um, white supremacy to some degree, because you're separating it's not intersectional almost at all, because it's basically taking massive groups of people, right? There's you've got all these different people, and you're chunking on you're taking one group and you're setting them aside, and you're lumping all of the others into one thing that's effectively like a monolith. um, and you're grouping all of their individual lived experiences through their racial lens, and you're just kind of like sticking it together and saying, and then you're basically saying, okay, these people who are uh, people of color, they are in this box and they're down here, and they have to be in this box down here because there's white people who are in this box up here, right? And so I feel like it's a strange term. I understand that there's a use for it, and I'm not necessarily in favor of eliminating it completely, but I think that um, I think it has some problems, and I'm not sure. I'd be interested in having a discussion about that, um, about what those problems are and how to deal with it, and if there are any alternatives, because I think that it's also kind of like in general contradiction with intersectionality, um, because intersectionality is supposed to individualize each person, take into account their individual differences and life experiences, and then moving forward with with those things in mind. And so when you have POC or people of color, you're kind of you're just lumping everybody in together. And so yeah, I think that it's just kind of a little bit of an odd one to me. It's a little bit of an odd one to me. Um, I'll be right back. I want to get something to drink. You wake up, baby? Baby. Babe. Baby. 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 Baby, now. You want to keep sleeping? Go for it. It's a little article. Why do anti-woke free thinkers all have the same opinions? Just on that headline alone, my answer effectively is that we all kind of see the inherent problem with the woke ideology, and we can all kind of see where it leads to. We can all kind of see what it is that it's pushing, and we understand that there is a denial of these things. There's a denial that these things that they're pushing for, um, such as like redefining race, um, trans entering sports, and then there's the what is it, the progressive stack. Um, Progressive stack once again is kind of it's one of those it's one of those concepts where when you see it in action, when you see it in action, I wonder if I can even if I can find this, because it's one of the most hilarious things. Um, it's one of the most hilarious things to watch in action. What was it called? Um, Forgive me for wasting your time for a moment. I don't have it anymore. Let me see if I can find it. Progressive Stack Convention. I can't remember what the thing was called, but I'm sure the DSA convention, day 2, the Progressive Stack. This was one of the silliest things that I've seen. Like, just to watch it happen. Um, Let me see if this is. Okay, dang it. Dang it, dang it, dang it. I can't get the volume in working on this. But if you watch this, you can see people, um, and what they do, like the level, like the way that they're able to, how quickly they're able to move forward on things is astounding. Um, Everything gets bogged down. Everything gets bogged down because somebody will use the term guys. They'll use guys um, as a term, or they'll use guys as something to comment about something or whatever. Make it a little bigger. You've got these people over here, and let's see. So she just said, I know you can't hear it, but she said there's been 3 men who have um, made motions, and so let's just keep that in mind. So that's basically saying, like, okay, men need to kind of start. They need to take a back seat now, and so it's a lot less of it's diversity in differences of individuals, but not diversity in ideas and thoughts and what people believe. And these people are all of the same general ideology. They're all they're all on board with all of this stuff, but because they are white, or because they are male. They don't have the really I don't know if I want to say authority, but they don't, in some sense, they don't really have the authority to express themselves. They don't in really much of a meaningful way, because it's kind of immediately looked down. Like, okay, when the fourth guy comes up, then it's like, oh, geez, here's another guy. Great, I have to listen to this person. Like, I have to listen to his opinion, and it's like, so you're not really considering or taking into account the opinions of people. That's not really what you're doing. You're taking into account the opinions of lots of different people, of which you don't know what you don't really know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. I mean, you're not really taking the opinions of individuals anymore. You're taking the opinions, and you're valuing each opinion in some sense the same. And I think that when you're doing something like that, it's you run into some pretty big into some into some pretty, yeah, point of privilege. Yeah, that's one of the. I wonder. I don't know how I can. How can I get the volume on this? Maybe in. Hmm. I think that might have to be something that I check out later. They were just sorry. They were just talking about how people were. There was a man and a woman who were having a discussion while other people were talking, and that it was very disrespectful. And so it's almost like here, it's like we are demanding your attention. It's like, well, I mean, it's somewhat fair enough. Somewhat fair enough. Like, maybe take that discussion, you know, out of the immediate range of other people. But it's just kind of a. It seems a little. Yeah, it's just kind of weird to me. It's just kind of weird to me. Um, so I guess I got an hour in. I got a Nobody necessarily joined. I think when I do these things, I kind of want to put an hour in to see if there's anybody who is interested in hopping in and joining. Um, if not, after an hour, because I know I last time I did this, I got kind of people started kind of coming in, and were interested about 30 or so minutes. I guess that was at least one person. And then suddenly it was like, oh my goodness, there's a whole bunch of people who are getting involved in all this stuff. So I ended up having a lot of people in, but I didn't even have the ability to get through. Um, but without somebody else to kind of bounce ideas off of and to have a conversation, I can kind of get tapped out pretty pretty quick to some degree, because I think I've mostly said a lot of the things that I would want to say, and then I would also want to hold on to other thoughts or ideas that you know I that I can use in a future video to kind of run up the clock. um, so I guess I'm gonna call it. I appreciate it for anybody who hopped in, and anybody that might see this video in the future. If you're interested, if you leave a comment or something, I'll know that people are kind of paying some level of attention, or leave likes or whatever, and I'll be encouraged to do these things more. But I would like to um, build up an audience to some degree, at least enough of an audience to where when I go live, there are people who are interested in coming in and having a conversation. So yeah, I think I'm going to call it right there. Take it easy. Enjoy.